Thank you for joining us for this session this evening. I hope that all of you, by the way, stay exactly as talkative as you just were in the chat. This is really meant to be a session for you to get to know Clark. And also, I mean, we're talking about the FYI, but you have three wonderful Clark professors here who want to get to know you. So keep up that kind of talkative spirit here. So for a quick introduction, my name is Christopher Munoz-Colleen, and I am Assistant Director of Admissions for Access and Inclusion here at Clark. And I'm going to have my co-panelists introduce themselves. So how about in this order? Let's see, the order that I'm seeing you. So Jing, Rinku, and Nina, could you please introduce yourselves?
All right, so welcome. My name is Jing Zhao. I am a professor in information management and business analytics. I have been at Clark for 17.5 years. My research focuses on organizational impact of information and communication technologies, sustainable supply chain and consumption, as well as smart city. Currently, I'm working on a project that's I study the relationship between smart grid adoption and public policy, and then to see the impact of public policy on smart grids adoption, which in turn affect energy efficiency and peak load demand. What else? I enjoy very much teaching technology-related subject, especially the interconnection between technology and the organization, as well as technology and human behaviors and then societal impact. So that's me.
Great, I'll go next. I'm Rinku Roy Chowdhury, and I'm a professor in the geography department, and I work generally in the area of land use change, environmental change, and sort of social drivers and policy impacts of change. And I work in a lot of different contexts. I have research in the United States, but also in Mexico. I've worked in other countries in Latin America and also in South Asia as well, looking at the ways in which people are doing different kinds of land uses, practicing different kinds of natural resource management, and also actually dealing with climate risk when it comes to natural resources-based livelihoods. So for example, if they're farmers or fishers and so on and so forth, how do those livelihoods and livelihood streams, how are they impacted by climate change on the one hand, but also economic processes like globalization and market boom-bust cycles and so on for their products on the other. And I teach in these areas. I also teach courses in geographic information systems, and I'm teaching an intersession course right now on research design for our undergrads, basically a range of sophomores, juniors, and seniors in the class.
Hi, I'm Nina Kushner. I am a professor in the history department. My training is in early modern French history, 18th century French history. But I've really worked much more now on history of women, gender, and especially the history of sexuality. I wrote a book on mistresses in 18th century France. And now I'm working on a book on adultery in 18th century France, which seems like a natural correlate. And I'm editing some big works. I'm editing a 6-volume series for Bloomsbury on the cultural history of prostitution. And I just agreed to edit their handbook on the history of prostitution, sexuality, on the history of sexuality. So that's a lot of what I research. I teach more broadly on European history, history of women, gender, and sexuality as well. Wonderful. Oh, and I've been at Clark for 15 years. I was doing the math while Rinku and Jing were talking.
Actually forgot to say how long I've been at Clark. It hasn't been as long as the other two faculty members here, but I joined Clark in the fall of 2015. However, I did my PhD at Clark many years before that. So I do have a lot of Clark years under my belt, but even if it's fewer years as faculty member.
That's amazing. So thank you all. And actually, now that it looks like the rest of the viewers are here, I wanted to just say congratulations again. If you're watching, I just want to emphasize how honored we were to read your applications and learn about your interests and hear your stories, truly. And we're really excited to get to know you. So keep up all of this talkativity here, and I'm going to redirect you to the Q&A. So if you have any technical issues, the chat is the place to let us know, but this is really meant to be a conversation. So as questions come up for you, feel free to put them in the Q&A, and we'll have time at the end to pose them to our panelists. Let's see, let's get started then with the first year intensive, which is why you all came here. So the first year intensive is a course that every incoming Clark student will take. This is a really introductory and foundational course, and students can choose from a range of disciplines, so bear that in mind. Whether you take an FYI in the humanities or the sciences, the goal is truly going to be the same. It's really to build foundational skills, for a higher level of academic rigor, and that's teaching critical thinking, writing, and debating. But it's also to help you get more familiar with resources at Clark. So it's kind of like how to be a college student, but also how to be one on this campus. There are two qualities that I would say are important to keep in mind, and that is the FYI is typically limited to 16 students. So it's a small classroom environment, and the professor serves as your academic advisor. This is really, I think, an amazing environment because you're starting your college career and you're seeing your advisor at least as many times as you have this class in the week, right? It's not once a semester and then 6 months later. So they really see your emerging interests over that first semester. And there's a sense of community as well. So we have 3 faculty members with us who teach FYIs. And I thought it'd be interesting if you all could each tell us a bit more about the FYI that you teach. So how about we'll take the same order. So Jing, Rinku, and Nina, could you please tell us about your FYI courses?
Okay, so I teach the introduction to information systems. So that is FYI from particularly the management major. So I take that FYI with a number of characteristics, I guess, or my understanding of the FYI. So the first characteristic is relationship building. So because it's small and it's kind of flexible, we sit in this crazily long classroom behind of you, Christopher. That's typically in JC 100 something. It's a very interesting environment, allow me nearly see everybody in front of me, like in a long row. So it's very conducive to a discussion type of class. In this class, I think that's it's becoming very quickly that I start to know all the students, and also the students start to know themselves very quickly. Interesting enough, their communication sometimes can be more useful or informative among themselves, especially at the time that's talking about what curriculum activity that you should participate, and what major or the classes, which professors you should pick. So a lot of the informal communication ties formed in the FYI class. So I think the relationship building is a big part of the class. And the second part is advising. So once I start to know everyone's interest, I start to kind of guide them in picking a major or minor, or the combination of each. Sometimes, students come in with very clear purpose. I want to do management major, economics minor, and 5th year. So there's all kinds of variations. And some people would say, I'm not exactly sure what I want to do. So the advising is a key piece to guide everyone, try to figure out your strengths, your interests, and opportunities to develop a unique pathway for everyone. And then the third element for me is also to introduce the student to management. So this is one of the two FI class, I believe, in management. So I try to give a broader view about, the management as a discipline, what it covers, and what kind of practice orientation is there, and what kind of hand-on exercise we can bring into in order to understand the field. And I also bring the student to the building itself, management Carson Hall, and we have a pizza kind of session, and then we talk about what management is really about, and what are some of the opportunities, and what are some of the challenges, and what are people's fear and scares about, and we demystify those type of thing. So it's kind of, there is a practice management orientation into this class. So that's kind of my understanding of what's the definition of FYI. I will leave to the other panelists to talk about their experiences.
Okay, so I think I'm next. And unfortunately, a little bit of feedback on my end, but maybe Chris, you can let us know if that's a problem. It seems to have gone away now, but okay. So I guess I'll begin my brief blurb about my FYI course with a confession, and that confession is that when I moved here in 2015 back to Worcester, I came from Indiana University, where I was a professor there in the geography department. And this was actually an opportunity for me to come home in a way, because as I mentioned before, I got my PhD here in Worcester, in Clark. However, at the time that I was a PhD student here, my gaze was almost entirely focused on Mexico, because that is where my research was unfolding. And while I really enjoyed Worcester, I didn't really learn a heck of a lot about the city and about the landscape of the city and about the kinds of subjects that I study that really I'm fascinated with. But I had never thought about those subjects, about environmental management and policy and conservation in the context of Worcester. And I love Worcester. So when I moved back here, I'd just been sort of, these ideas had been churning in my head. And I figured that I really needed to educate myself about certain topics and how they are relevant and how they play out in Worcester. And what better way to learn about a certain topic than teaching it? So I decided to actually design this FYI called Water and the City as a way of thinking about waterways and watersheds and all kinds of really complicated and interesting historical factors and policy factors and technological factors that have to do with our relationship to water and water management through time in this particular city. And so I've now taught this FYI course 3 times, if I'm counting right. And I've just learned and really enjoyed learning with the students a lot of different dimensions of this topic. And it's been a great opportunity as well to connect with city, public works departments, with conservation programs, with NGOs in the area, and with other stewardship organizations and so on. So it's actually a course which oftentimes carries the additional designation of POP, which is Problems of Practice, which is a particular kind of course that bridges the gap between academia and sort of, society or policy oftentimes and so on. And my course sort of fits in that niche also. So, that's kind of the background behind my FYI that I developed. And it's just been a fantastic experience to get to know the students themselves, of course, and kind of get to know their perspectives on what we're discovering in the field. And most of the course is actually in the field. About 80% of our class meetings happen in the field. And for that reason, we actually only meet for a longer session once a week typically, rather than 2 classes a week or 3 classes a week, just to allow time to get out into the field. So you guys might be thinking, well, what about COVID? I actually taught the FYI course in last fall, and we were able to adapt all our field trips to avoid field vehicles, which we just couldn't rent anymore. And we did walking field trips from right around Clark campus. And that's amazing. It gives you an idea for how much interesting stuff there is right within walking distance of Clark when it comes to, protected green space or waterways and so on and so forth. There's a great relationship between tree cover and waterways, actually. Chris also suggested we talk about like a moment from one of our FYIs, and one of those moments from just this past fall FYI that I taught was when we went on a walking field trip to Beaverbrook Park, which is within about a 9-minute walk of Clark. And we were accompanied by somebody from the Worcester County Soil Conservation District, who also is really interested in stream ecology. And he jumped into the stream for us and demonstrated some stream, invertebrate sampling. And amongst the critters that he fished out of the stream were a lovely collection of leeches, which were really a huge hit with the students. I was not expecting them to be so popular, but that was one moment that, from just this past semester that stood out for me.
I think that's the perfect segue. Like, if you're going to talk about what I teach, leeches are perfect, right? But I do want to say, like, one of the fun things about doing things like this is you get to hear what your colleagues are doing. And when you get to Worcester and you start looking, there's water everywhere. Like we had this ice storm and the pump next door broke, and suddenly there's a river running through my backyard. It was Westbrook. And so I really now want to take your course and learn more about that. So I teach a course called Witchcraze, and it looks at this sort of witch hunts from about 1400 to 1800, 1400 to 1750, let's say, when about between 30,000 and 50,000 women, mainly women, 30,000 to 50,000, I should be smiling, people were executed, and many, many more were arrested and accused of witchcraft. And this course asks sort of why, like, why did this happen? And what do we have to understand in order to even ask that question? And so we look at legal history, and we look at cultural history, and we look at ideas of the devil, and we look at the Reformation, and we look at women's history, and we sort of work our way through it. And then we do a couple of case studies, usually ones on Salem, and we go to Salem. But then the last couple of weeks of the course, we kind of look at what's sort of left. And I often let the students sort of pick these units, and then we sort of find readings. So it's like, well, what about the idea of the witch hunt, right? Can we look at McCarthyism? Or what about Salem as a producer of public history? And I used to take my students, I still do, I just couldn't this year, but I take students to the Salem Witch Museum. And the Salem Witch Museum, and I don't know if anyone's been to it, but until recently, it was sort of a problem, like it was all wrong. And one of my students ended up becoming their director of education, and then they put her through grad school and they redid the whole thing. And it's sort of amazing now. I don't take credit for that that she was doing that, and then she helped me with the course, and she's just amazing. And sometimes we look at like witches in popular culture. Like, another fun moment was, I think Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them came out, and I was like, all right, let's go, we're gonna go see this movie. So we went to the movie at night, and I drove. I guess I wasn't supposed to do that, and I won't. I promise I won't drive your children anywhere. But back then, that was sort of before this rule was in place. And I remember, this is so off topic, but my kids came, and they were in the back of the car, and they thought, oh, isn't this great? Let's impress the college students. And you can imagine what little kids would say. And just Clark students are just so lovely. But we saw this movie, and we talked about it in the context of understanding emerging ideas of witches and witchcraft, and pulled Harry Potter back in. So it's just a really fun course. Just circling back to what Jing said as sort of these 3 basic things that happen in the FYI, I would say that's absolutely true. These personal relationships, sort of understanding sort of the field, and advising. And I know we're gonna get into that in a minute.
Wonderful, thank you. So those were, I did not expect that when I asked for the specific moment for those to be so interesting. So thank you for sharing that. And I actually want to pose a question to all of you now, and this is really leading up again to the Q&A. So for everyone watching, if you have questions for our professors, feel free to start putting them in now. But one aspect that we've heard about with the FYI is kind of preparation for higher level rigor. So I think maybe as an open question to the panel, you know, how does the FYI kind of help with that transition to maybe, you know, a higher level of academic work than students are accustomed to?
I'll just start, just reverse the order. So I think, okay, I have students for one semester and it's their first semester in college. What is it that I can teach them that they can carry across any major, right? And typically only 25% of my students become history majors or intended to become history majors. Sometimes I get a few more, but most of them are in other fields ranging from sort of math to management. I mean, it's really very broad. So there's two things that happen. One is that we really work on basic skills, like what are the skills you need to be a successful student? You need to be organized. You need to figure out, you need to learn how to study. When you start to run into trouble, then we sort of troubleshoot and make sure that you can perform at this level. The other thing that I work on, and I know every class is different, is it's just really being able to identify an argument and assess it. So this is a scaffolded assignment. So we have like a paper a week, and the first couple of weeks, it's like, well, what is the argument, i.e. what are the main points? Then we move on to how do we assess it? And then we move on to longer and longer readings where they do this until they have to do it either for a book or a couple of articles. So they really learn this skill that they can, I mean, any major needs you to be able to do this. You need to be able to read the reading, say what it says, and then say something about that. So that sort of prepares them. And I pulled that from my own FYI in college, where I landed at this elite school coming from a not so great city high school and was given all these monographs and said, read them and let's talk about them. And I couldn't process them. I just didn't have the training. Like I was like, this is being set up to fail. And so while some students certainly can do this, I can help them do it better. And other students just really need the skill set.
Rinku, you want to go ahead first?
Sorry, yes, I was actually typing some answers in the Q&A boxes as well. So sorry for getting distracted. You know, professors can also get distracted. So you shouldn't feel like you're alone on that regard. So Chris, could you repeat the prompt again for me? I think it might have been the same question that I'm actually typing answers to in terms of the college experience. Is that right?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so this is about, how the FYI kind of preps you for college level work.
Yeah, so that's exactly, so I think it was Benjamin also had a question in Q&A along the same lines. And, so basically what I was saying was it really runs the gamut of just working with students in the group, but also individually, very much individually, because as we mentioned, as your FYI instructor, we also become, your advisors during your entire first year in college. And that means certainly advising you through the details of, academic course selections, which department should I, take courses in, how do I fulfill these distribution requirements that in Clark we call PLS requirements, what should I major in even? A lot of students, right, in the first semester, first year, are beginning to think about majors and how to connect their passions and interest areas. Some students might also just approach me for some assistance with getting connected with additional resources around campus. And if I'm able to, if I have knowledge about that, then I connect them. Otherwise, I might send somebody to the Career Connection Center or something like that for more for other kinds of advising and resources as well. I actually just had an email from one of my fall FYI students about, what should I do my master's in? And I'm interested in environmental social sciences, and I've been talking with people, and they say there are no jobs in the area. And so I was able to point her towards the U.S. Department of Labor job outlook statistics, which actually show that, that particular sector is well above average in terms of projected job growth. It's actually 8% above average, which is actually a big margin as these percentages go. But other folks, maybe just need a little bit more assistance with time management. There's a big difference when you step into a college, the college student life, because all of a sudden it seems like you have oodles of free time, when that time can be sucked up really quickly between your coursework and then your co-curricular, extracurricular activities, which Clark really encourages students to engage in, and so on, and just the important informal time of creating new friendships and just social circles and so on. So oftentimes I'm just giving some general advice on just strategy about time management. And then fundamentally, I'll say, just coming back to the academic role, just kind of, getting those training wheels on in terms of how to read critically, how to think critically, and not just be a sponge and absorb information uncritically, but how to actually begin to evaluate and adjudicate information sources, right? Particularly when you have competing claims to truth and objectivity, and so again, there are lots of different things that I think I find myself working with my FYI students on, and they really take on, it depends on the individual, sort of what sort of aspect they're kind of seeking more assistance on.
Great. So I will speak a little bit about my thinking of helping students transition into the college learning environment. So the first thing that I have thought a lot about is how to help students to get into the self-directed learning. So I think a big transition is, instead of teaching what it is, the knowledge itself, but instead teaching the structure of thinking, the structure of learning. Especially in the field that I am in, the technology field, it evolves so quickly, and it really is useless to teach people how to press the next button and write the next code. It's really helpful, however, to teach the thinking, the design thinking, the system thinking. So a lot of the exercise that I do, so we do a lot of exercise in this class. Instead of going out a lot, we actually stay a lot of time in the lab, in the computer labs. And then with COVID, we have a virtual lab, which is wonderful, allow me to play a lot of new things. We do a lot of exercises, but then instead of teaching you how to do exactly from A to B, I teach very simple stuff in principle. This is, for example, let's build a web page. And this is the basic how the code look like, and how you play with the hyperlinks between pages. But then now here is your turn. If you want to do something in greater depths, and how you would be able to find the resources. And I list a number of resources. And here, take this tutorial, take that tutorial, you need this for that, those kind of thing. And then for people who really want to go into the depths of that, they can be guided along the way to much deeper of thinking. So I think my role as teacher is more than teacher, but facilitator of learning. So I think that's an important element of transition into college learning. The second thing is critical thinking. So people with information technology, I think this critical thinking is especially important. So in the class, we talk about the cases that we talk about positive impact of technology. And then we flip it around and ask the question, what are the negative perspectives? And what about unintended consequences to our organization, to yourself, to the society? And then I remember that whenever that I show this video about cybersecurity and the human face of big data. So these are the two videos that I kind of leave to the end of the semester, because I felt it was really my hidden secrets, and then we will generate a lot of interesting discussion. And then it's always the moment that people start to say, yeah, I never thought about it. And Professor, why didn't you tell me to begin with so we can integrate this whole thing in throughout the semester? I said, yes, we did actually. But then here is the moment that we bring it really into a salient place and push in front of you. And then you really have to think about it in a very comprehensive way. Rather than accept something like technology unconditionally and think about what would be the consequences, unintended consequences to us and the general society. So I think that's another level that college students need to get into more. And also, I think what is important for knowledge acquisition is to pull it apart and then bring it together. So in this class, we talk about different pieces of information technology. We talk about hardware, softwares, applications, and the implementations, resource management, project management, so on and so forth. But then how you bring all these knowledge elements back together. So each semester I would design a project, a group project. So the student would create a fictional business and use the various tools that we have introduced to present the concepts of this business, marketing, operations, financial projections, visualization of the different data, and then present to the entire class. And then that's the moment that you really start to say, okay, how these things fits together and where are the gaps and where I might want to go a little bit more and deeper in order to make this happening. So that's kind of my hope to introduce a student into more rigorous learning. And at the same time, a very, I would say, a challenging but interesting perspective, because then you can really do a lot of things with these abstract concepts. Yeah, so that's my reflection.
Thank you. So that was wonderful also, just for getting a sense of the approach behind the FYI. And I think this might be a great bridge to a question that I'm seeing in the Q&A here from a viewer who said, are there study groups or hours in the library or academic support areas of Clark to help stay organized and on top of things? A structure for a student to create that for themselves. Would the advisor help establish this? So that question of would the advisor help establish this makes me think of our next and final point before really open Q&A here. But that advising aspect, I think we touched on it. Also, Nina mentioned earlier kind of different ways that advising can look. Some students come in undecided, some people have a set major in mind. So could anyone speak to this question of, what is advising, but also this question from the student about, what kind of resources do I get pointed to?
I think sort of, Rinku, you went through this, and Jing, you mentioned it as well. So I'm just going to echo some of the points that you made, which is that I think there's, so Jing was talking earlier about, I think it was you, helping students sort of find their path. So figuring out what their interests are. And sometimes they think they know, and sometimes they really do know. And sometimes they have an interest, but then you're like, I think you may also be interested in this. So it's sort of like trying to make sure that they're aware of all the different things that they can study and how they might connect to each other, and then helping them sort of go along that path, not just to complete a major, but also, directing them toward internships. There's an office for that, but just sort of making them aware, or in fellowships or various research projects along the way, so that they can kind of realize their intellectual ambitions. But the other thing is to make sure that they can actually do the work, right? So like, it's one thing if you figure out this plan that you want to be, a historian of 18th century France, because, I know everyone's born wanting that, but it's another to actually be able to sort of do that work. And I think that a lot of what we do is sort of help identify, skills that students might need. In some cases, teach them directly. In some cases, maybe help them find the support that they need. So like, for example, my FYI, I always have what's called a PLA. It's a peer learning assistant, and it's a senior. And I know a lot of other people do this as well. And that person is really a bridge in the sense between some of the advising that I do that's academic and like helping students deal with the reality on the ground. So every Friday, part of class would be dealing with advising. So some examples would be, all right, it's week one. Like, what are some of the challenges? What are some of the great things that that are happening? Like week 4, every year, honeymoon's over. Like you're still excited, but now you're getting work, and that work is not slowing down, it's speeding up. How do you deal? How do you deal with midterms? Like, how do you deal with midterm stress? So all these things. So that gets back to what the anonymous person asked about, that I think the key is to help students create these structures for themselves. And some people are going to know that they need a group, right? That they're always going to need a group. I'm one of those people. I do much better working with other people than I do alone. But that's something that we would like to help our students understand about themselves. Also basic, as Rinku said earlier, basic time management. Like, how do you deal with the fact that all of a sudden, most of your day is empty? You don't have all these things scheduled. And I know, like, my first day of class, I give them a blank calendar and I'm like, fill it in. When did you have class? When do you have other things that are, you can't move? And when are you going to study for each class? Like, I want it in here, and I want you to figure out where you're going to do it. And then, they stick to it or they don't, and we kind of work on it through the term. So the idea is that by the end of the semester, they should have some pretty solid skills. And I will leave it to my colleagues to see their other answers, other questions about this.
Yeah, if there's anything, I think there's a related question also from Benjamin that I noticed. Do FYIs usually involve general college life skills as well as academic skills? So Nina, you touched upon this as well with the peer learning assistant. So that's an older student who's there kind of to help in a way that maybe a professor can't quite help to fill in those gaps. But does anything else come to mind for the panel of general college life skills? I know we've talked about time management.
So
yep.
I can speak a little bit about that because we used to do it in competition with FYI. So now at Clark, there is a FYE. So it's a series of courses where these skills such as financial management, time management, and getting to know the neighborhood. So a lot of those things, there is a FYE course or a series of seminars where students would get a specific treatment in these particular areas, but also in the class. So Nina talked a little bit about advising, and so I would mention 2 things. One is I have a lab session that I would have a very experienced student, typically is graduate student, but it's our 5th year student who has gone through the 4 years of study, who is in the senior year. The students would help with the lab work as well as a lot of, the management of the students and getting students question answered. And then the second point I want to mention is the advising. So advising involving a lot of discovery so this kind of exercise to think about what you are good at and what you really are strong at something, and what you are aspiring to do something with the external opportunities. So that's kind of, my responsibility, I would say, my responsibility to have as broad a perspective as possible, to know outside world, by introducing this kind of way of thinking, what are the opportunities out there that would allow you to maximize your strengths, your internal capability. So that's always the exercise that I like to do with the student. So with advising, I would say there are two types of students. One type, the student that's really clear, as I mentioned, about the past. Then my task is to optimize. So my task would be say, okay, so if you want is management major, econ minor, here is the best path for you. Let's optimize all the resources that you can gather in this environment. You first take this perspective classes, and then each year 2 class in this perspective and that perspective. You take 2 management class, and then along the way you pick 1 or 2 minor classes. And then in the 3rd year, you might want to go study abroad. And then those are some of the courses you potentially can transfer back into either your major or minor. And then in the last year, you might be really eligible for the 5th year study. And you might be interested in this slew of, there is public administration, there is education, there is business analytics, and different kind of career paths. And then let's see how you can optimize all these resources that Clark can offer. So that's one type of student. The other type of student, I'm not exactly sure. I'm interested in this. I'm also interested in that. So my task is exploring with the student what kind of class you enjoying of taking. And let's take one class in that field. If you really like philosophy, you like psychology, geography, actually geography and psychology are the typical, course the students are really interested, because that's how Clark kind of attracts students. And then my task is to say, okay, great, because here is a liberal art perspective class that you have to take. Why don't we take one perspective class from psychology and one science perspective class from geography? So you get a flavor of the major that you might be getting yourself into. And then let's come back, and then I want to hear your feedback. Do you want to go on this path more, or do you want to actually turn around and do something else? So when you do this exploration, however, you also are growing. You're growing the perspective that you have to take. That's kind of the liberal art education that's we really take very deep into our heart. We believe in that broader perspective. So you explore it, and then a lot of times the student have conflicting mind, like, oh, I really like the art class, but my parent want me to do management, and I'm, my art professor said I'm so gifted. I said, you are gifted. You should really follow through this. How about we do art major and management minor? So you could actually think of career in managing an art studio, or you do auction for the art. So there is different kind of career paths that allow you to combine a lot of the things that you are really strong, but also giving you a solid landing place once you graduate. So that's kind of the advising piece that I have worked on.
I just have to say, I could not agree more with what you just said, Jing. And and I'll just say from my own personal experience, I came to the United States for my undergraduate degree in a liberal arts college. And actually, I saw in the chat there was someone from Wellesley. So Wellesley College was where I came. And I think this is one of the biggest trends of the US educational system, is the liberal arts curriculum. Europe doesn't have it. And I think that this is one of those, kind of most powerful aspects of what we do here in college at Clark, and we take that very seriously. But at Clark also, because at the same time as we're a liberal arts institution, we're also a world-class research university. So I feel like we're able to provide a range of experiences to our undergraduate students that make them not just, learners and absorbers of information, but also producers of knowledge and information, because they get involved in research with faculty, whether that's here domestically or in Worcester, or working with us in other field settings internationally and so on. So But that passion, what Jing's talking about, like, what are you really excited about? What are you enjoying? That's so important, because, that's also what I said in one of the questions from RM, that, who said basically that, they find that there's so many interesting things, interesting classes, that it can get overwhelming. So what can we do in that situation? And my advice would also be, just as Jing said, pay attention to what moves you, what you're really enjoying doing, what you're passionate about, and then, kind of be open to additional influences and so on. And I, my undergrad was in computer science. I went on to do a master's in ecology, and then I did a PhD in geography. So I have a very, very broad set of interests that kind of really echo the kind of, thing that RM was writing about. And but I find ways to make connections, and that is something that advisors and professors at Clark and other folks at Clark are, I think, particularly strong at doing, is enabling students who may think that, oh, well, art and management, what on earth connects those two? But there are complementarities, there's synergies that I think we're quite good at. I'll prime, maybe this is a little bit of pride here, but I think as an institution, we try to help students to see very individualized connections that they can make, that can, really bridge their interests in ways that are unexpected. And one example of that is a global environmental studies major. I serve as the director for that major. And I routinely advise students in that major that are combining very different departmental courses like arts and earth system science. So again, I think just being open, but also being really responsive and reflective about what you're enjoying, what your strengths are, what you're passionate about. That's really important.
Yeah, it's funny. It's not like we're sort of, we had this sort of training on how to do this, but it's literally the exact same answers. I've said to my students so many times, follow your passions, follow your interests. And you need 32 courses to graduate from Clark. A lot of majors are like between 10 and 12. So there's a lot of room to explore double major, minor, and still have all these different other courses in different fields that you can take in order to kind of, it's not just to figure out what students are interested in, but to help them develop multiple perspectives so that when they leave Clark, they have all these different ways that they can understand the world, process the world, and engage with the world. And again, just echoing Rinku's last comment, but Jing had mentioned it earlier too, what's really amazing, at least for me as faculty, is to see students make those connections, right? About how these different classes, these different foci relate to each other, and then how they're going to carry that with them moving forward.
That was incredibly helpful. So thank you all for illustrating that advising aspect. We have one related question here from Viola, who says, do the FYI course selections change every year, or do they relatively remain the same? So that's one question. And then besides the skills you listed, what other lessons or skills do you hope students take away from the FYI?
I can grab the first half. So when you teach an FYI, as you all know, those students become your advisees, and that's 16 students. And so generally professors don't teach the same course every year because they would have too many advisees to be able to advise them all and give them all the time that they need. And also sometimes departments need those professors to teach other courses, or the professors go on sabbatical. So, and for the most part, like I teach the Witchcraze. There's not another professor in my department that does it. So if I'm not going to teach it, something else, one of my colleagues will teach one of their very exciting and wonderful FYIs. So I think another way to think about it is that departments try and offer the same number of FYIs every year. So if you want to take one in management, you want to take one in geography, you want to take one in math, CS, economics, there'll always be 1, 2, 3, however many they offer. It just may not be the exact same one. And you don't have to take one in the field you want to major. You'll get one of these perspectives that counts toward the requirements. So if you take the Witchcraze, but you're going to be a math major, you fulfilled your history requirement.
So in management, the FYI has been fairly consistent. Mm-hmm. So we have 2 intro courses we try to use intro courses as FYI. So these has been pretty stable, except the years that professor take a sabbatical.
Sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
Oh, as far as what else we want to get from them, I think it just goes back to one of Jing's first comments about having the students form a community and get grounded and understand Clark and the community. It's not just sort of the skills and understanding the academic discipline a bit and content knowledge. It's acculturating to the institution and feeling like they're a part of it.
I'll also say one of those skill sets is actually learning how to work in teams and groups. And that is also something I see a lot of in Clark. And before Clark, I was a professor at 2 other institutions. I was at Indiana University. Before that, I was at the University of Miami. That looks very different, that campus, that campus right now in January from Worcester at the moment. But the very first class that I taught at Clark, it was a course on geographic information systems, and on day 1, I asked students to raise their hands if they had worked on group projects before, and every single hand in the class went up, and that just sort of blew my mind, because that was definitely not the case at other institutions I've worked at. I think that, really work is going towards team-based collaboration and so on. And those are incredibly important soft skills that are really critical, not just in the college career, but certainly in the professional world out there. And Clark, I think through the FYI as well, but in other courses too, there are a lot of opportunities to actually collaborate on team-based work. And in my FYI, we usually have a final project that people work in groups towards and produce something at the end of the semester. So that's another aspect of soft skills.
So thank you. And there's a question here that in the final moments I think would be a great one to end on, which is from RM, who asked, what is your favorite aspect of the FYI?
Mine is to be out in the great outdoors with my students having fun. The field-based work. I love that. Every single student that's been on it has loved it. I think they wouldn't be enrolling in that class if they didn't like being outside, because that's one of the requirements that they know already. So that's definitely my favorite.
Nina, you want to
Okay, sure. Yeah, no, I've been, they're, they're just really fun. I mean, it's sort of collaborative. Like it's this idea, I mean, we're working together to sort of get to know each other, to move to this place as a group where they're sort of ready to tackle college full on. And that's just a really fun process. And it's also, it's I don't know, it feels like sort of an honor to be part of the process of students sort of becoming who they're going to be, right? There's sort of in this process, and you have this really important role, and it's really fun. I also just find that class, despite the subject, to be a fun class. That's not a good answer. They're fun. That's what I like about them. First year students they're really excited and engaged. All our students are excited and engaged. I'm going to stop. Jing, why don't you go?
Yeah, I can't agree more with you. And I also want to add this word, fun, exciting, and fresh. So that's what I really like when I enter the room of my FYI. And you see these fresh faces, everyone is so eager and really want to learn something and really want to build connection with this place. So I really enjoy that freshness. And what's my second favorite part is to be able to see, so along the way, they enter our graduate program. So that's kind of interesting to to say, oh, you said you want to do this remember you said you want to do this in the first year, and why didn't you do that? Instead, you are doing this, which is wonderful. But so to be able to see how they just blossomed opens up. I think a lot of the Clark students, it's very interesting. I would call it kind of intellectually curious, but sometimes not entirely opened up when they enter the campus. Not exactly sure. Not like someone, you know, I'm going to do exactly this. I think a lot of times there is this tentative hesitation, but then to see how they really embrace themselves and find this confidence from within, from the proof that they have done this, they lead some effort, they made a great thrust into a subject areas that they find initially challenging. They insert their place at this campus. So that is really rewarding to see the growth of students through the eyes of FYI and an advisor. So.
Wonderful, thank you all. I just want to echo a comment that I saw, I believe from Tracy, who said from a parent, you are all awesome. I completely echo that. Jing, Rinku, and Nina, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your perspectives about the FYI. That was enormously helpful. And also, I want to thank everyone who's watching. And I just want to reiterate also that we are so honored that you applied to Clark. We were so impressed with you, and selfishly, we really would love it if you came to Clark. But of course, we want to help you make the best decision possible for you. So just keep us in mind as resources along the way. So I'm just going to share this slide with our contact information. So yes, there we go. So please know that you're always welcome to write admissions or financial aid. Our phones are also open if you would like to give us a call. Whatever medium works best for you, we're happy to be in touch with you along the way. Until then, I hope you all stay safe and well. And again, Jing, Rinku, and Nina, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. So what a wonderful set of questions and audience. Wish you all the very best. Thank you.
We hope to see you. But thanks.
In our class.
In our classes, yeah.
All right, take care, everyone.